Welcome to Crawlspace. I'm Tim here today with Lance. Lance, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic today, Tim. We have a return guest on that makes me feel great because we always love having this gentleman on. I hope everyone who's listening is doing fantastic. And the person who's coming up brings a new outlook, a new perspective to a mystery that feels like it never goes away. And Tim, I have a mystery that never goes away from me on a weekly basis. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks a lot for asking. And yeah, I'm excited to introduce this conversation with old friend and return guest, Eric Ulis. You can find out everything that Eric's up to at ericulis.com. But this time, Lance, we're talking about JFK, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the former president who was assassinated on November 22nd, 1963 in Dallas, Texas. And what Eric is bringing to the table here is an element of this case that he believes history has gotten wrong.
So if you're a fan of history and if you're a fan especially of JFK, we highly recommend this episode. And I think if you hear what Eric is saying, you'll find that it is important in a historical sense.
Yeah, it really is, and I hope you history buffs out there really love it. Definitely let us know what you think on social media at Crawlspace Podcast or Crawlspace Pod. Hey, Lance, speaking of Crawlspace, we were just nominated for a Clue Award. And the Clue Awards are from CrimeCon. It's their second annual Clue Awards, and we were nominated for Best Outstanding Episodic Series.
Yeah, and I'm not being cliche by saying it's an honor to be nominated, and we want to thank the people who are responsible for nominating all of the creators in this category, and it's really cool to just see our name up there with shows like Missing in America, My Life in Crime, Predators I've Caught, Zone 7. And Tim, again, honored to be nominated, but what do you think if we won? What would you do?
Find the nearest pool to jump in with my tuxedo on?
And the award in your hand? But seriously, this is the second Clue Awards that's happening at CrimeCon, and we are super excited to be a part of that, and again, just super humbled to be in the same conversation as these other nominees.
Absolutely. Big thanks to everyone at CrimeCon and everyone who voted. And we'll see you at CrimeCon in just a few weeks, the weekend of September 22nd, 2023. We're going to be there in Orlando, Florida, at the Clue Awards as well, but we'll also be on Podcast Row. So if you're listening to this, come by and say hello.
And be sure to check out our panel. We're going to be featuring Dark Valley, our new show. So Jennifer and Mel will be there. Jane Borowski will be there. It's going to be incredible. We're going to go over the series. We're going to get a little Q&A going with Jane and maybe a couple of surprises. So this is going to be a good CrimeCon. Really, really looking forward to it, even if we don't win. But we will win because we're going to stuff the ballot boxes.
All right, everybody. Thanks a lot for listening. We're going to break quick for commercial here, and we'll be right back with Eric Ulis to speak about the JFK assassination. Welcome back to the podcast. Eric Ulis, how are you today?
I'm doing well, guys. How are you doing?
It's always a good day over here when we have you on the show, Eric, because you always bring these historical moments to the table and then we dissect them. And you have no problem digging into, obviously, D.B. Cooper. That is, I guess, sort of that's like your big one.
Claim to fame.
No. I was going for like that's your Moby Dick, right? That is that's your opus. I feel like you've done such a thorough job on D.B. Cooper, and then you brought some really fascinating insight into the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum heist. So you don't shy away from the big ones, and this one is a big one too. So we're really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this. But when did you first realize that, one, you had this like insatiable like desire to solve these mysteries, and two, have you always been like a fan of history? Is it important to you to look at these historic ones, like these significant historic ones, and try to put some answers to it? When did that all start to come together for you?
I would say I've always had the kind of mind that was interested in mysteries and cracking puzzles, things of that nature. For those of you who are old enough, you probably remember the Rubik's Cube. Yeah, I mastered the Rubik's Cube probably 40 years ago, whenever that thing came out. I think the fastest time I did it was in, I think, 15 seconds. I managed to be able to get it back to the proper thing in 15 seconds. I cheated. There was a book that was out that talked about different patterns and so forth to look for. So that was quite popular. So that's what I used. But as far as, mysteries and things of this nature, whether you're talking D.B. Cooper or the Garden Museum heist or other mysteries, I guess I've always had a fascination in this space, this type of thing, but there's a common thread, or there's an element that has to exist in these mysteries for me to be interested, and they have to be real. Not to dump on like the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot and, things like that, but, arguably, is it real or are they not real? Whatever. In the case of D.B. Cooper, or in the case of the Garden Museum heist, or some of the things surrounding the JFK assassination, these are real events, and there are real people involved. And obviously, by virtue of the fact that, there's a lot of mystery surrounding some of these cases for many decades now, they have a special historical significance in Americana, if you will. And so, for whatever reason, I've just been drawn to that, and here we are today.
Well, great. Yeah, pretty much same over here. Although I think we entertain the Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster thing a wee bit over here at Crawlspace. So tell us about this latest subject that you emailed us about. It's historical and very close to your heart. Yeah, tell us all about this story.
Yeah, this deals with the John F. Kennedy assassination. I'm a very big fan of JFK. I've been a big fan for as long as I can remember. And I've not only studied his life extensively, but I've also spent some time looking at the assassination. And I'll say from the word go here that I am absolutely convinced, and I think it's been proven well beyond a reasonable doubt, that the assassination of John F. Kennedy did not involve any kind of conspiracy. Rather, it was just as the Warren Commission said, it was one lone crazy guy who took 3 shots at the president and ultimately hit his target, and history has forever been changed because of it. So, that's just kind of where I am with respect to that. Now, having said that, there's one particular part related to the assassination that I've always just found kind of fascinating, and that relates to which of the 3 shots that were taken at John F. Kennedy missed. Because I'm not sure if there are many people who know this, but again, there were 3 shots taken at the president, and when the Warren Commission looked into this, they recovered 2 of the bullets or parts thereof. The 3rd bullet is completely missing, so that's indicative of a shot that just completely missed the president, completely missed the limousine, everything. Obviously, it was never recovered, and the Warren Commission was never able to determine which of the 3 shots missed. Was it the first shot? Was it the second shot? Or was it the 3rd shot? Now, several years later, there was the House Select Committee on Assassinations that revisited the assassination, and they issued a report in 1979. Now, that committee actually came to the conclusion that it was the first shot that missed, and it was the second shot that hit Kennedy in the back that caused his arms to kind of flail up. We've probably all seen that footage in the famous Zapruder film. And then it was the 3rd shot that hit the president in the head, and we all know what happened after that. Now, and that is, shall I say, that's pretty much the prevailing wisdom as far as it goes. That is that the first shot that missed, ironically, when the limousine was at its closest point to Lee Harvey Oswald in the sniper's nest. Well, in my mind, it just didn't pass the smell test. There are some problems I had with that, and I wasn't so certain. And through an extensive amount of research and investigation on my part, I ultimately determined with 100% confidence on my part that it was actually the third shot that missed. Was the third. Lee Harvey Oswald took a third shot when the limousine was actually racing away from the scene because the president had been killed with the second shot. And it was at that point that the limousine was actually at its furthest point from Lee Harvey Oswald and the sniper's nest. There was a quick third shot that was taken, and it's that shot that missed, and ultimately the bullet was never recovered as far as that goes. So I won't go too far down this path. I'll let you ask some questions, but that is historically significant in a couple of areas. One of which is the fact that this actually rewrites our understanding of history related to this significant historical event. We owe it to ourselves and to future generations to understand to the best of our ability precisely what happened. And being able to fix a mistake that the House Select Committee made in 1979 in establishing it was the first shot that missed, and fixing that error and establishing it as the third shot is important for no other reason than it was a historical event, obviously, and I think it's important to set the record straight. But beyond that, there are other things that enter the equation, if you will. There's other significance around it being a third shot that missed, rather than being a first shot that missed. And let me just kind of lay it out here. What happened is the limousine made a sharp left turn onto Elm Street. And it didn't travel very far down Elm Street. We're talking probably 50 feet, something like that. And Lee Harvey Oswald took his first shot at the president, and indeed he hit the president with the very first shot. Now, this is the very famous magic bullet shot, so-called magic bullet shot, because this is the shot, and this has been proven scientifically. This isn't theory anymore. This is fact. It's been proven that bullet entered the president kind of below his right shoulder, and then it came out of the president just below his throat, and then it continued straight into Governor Connolly's back, broke some ribs and did some damage, and ended up ultimately being lodged in Governor Connolly's leg. And it's this bullet that was lodged in Governor Connolly's leg that fell out of the wound at Parkland Hospital and was later found on the stretcher there in the hospital. Again, the so-called magic bullet. It's been very controversial, but this has been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that that's precisely what happened. It was the second shot that was taken 5.35 seconds later that hit the president in the head. And this is depicted on the very famous Zapruder frame 313. And then it was about 2.5 seconds later, approximately Zapruder frame 360, that there was a third and final shot taken that completely missed. And it would have been that third shot that didn't hit anything and, of course, was never recovered.
And just in your opinion, and even in your research, how common is it and I know people are thinking this, but really a bullet fell out of somebody? How common is that?
Well, it depends upon the situation, and it's very important to understand what's happening here. And again, this has all been proven. The bullet, entered Kennedy traveling quite fast. I want to say it's somewhere around I think 1,200 feet per second, something in that neighborhood. And as it traveled through his body, it slowed down a little bit, and then it was back, in open air, and then hit Governor Connolly. And when it hit the Governor Connolly, the bullet was actually slightly tumbling, and that you can see that in the shape of Governor Connolly's wound that is in his back. And then the bullet hit some ribs, broke some ribs, ricocheted, ended up hitting his wrist, and then actually exiting near his wrist and dislodging in his knee. And the entire time that this is happening, it stands to reason that the bullet is losing velocity. So by the time the bullet actually leaves his wrist and enters his leg, it's traveling at about 400 feet per second, and this is according to analysis. So it's fast enough to actually lodge within the flesh of his leg, but it's certainly not going to go into the center of his leg or go completely through the guy. So what you have here is you have the bullet is once again within his leg, but it's just within the leg, the flesh. Through all of everything that happened up from that point leading up to Parkland Hospital and being on a stretcher and everything else, the bullet just kind of was plopped out, this basically the flesh kind of just plopped it out, and it was just laying there on the stretcher, and it was recovered there. So that's what happened. And it's important to understand that a lot of this stuff would be very difficult to analyze and prove back in 1963 at the time of the assassination. But it was actually 1991. There was a company called Failure Analytics that applied then state-of-the-art technology related to all this stuff that proved unequivocally what had happened. And indeed, they've actually replicated that shot. It's very easy to replicate now when you situate President Kennedy relative to Governor Conley and, pull the trigger. They've been able to replicate, they've essentially been able to replicate that shot. So again, this is fact. This isn't conjecture. This is fact. So,
well, what the heck does Oliver Stone have to say about that then?
It probably doesn't make for a very sexy Hollywood story. So therefore, that's not going to work. We're going to have to come up with guys jumping out of manholes and grassy knoll shooters and everything else, even though there is absolutely zero to back it up, zero evidence to back it up.
Okay, so in that movie JFK, that's what we were referring to. They talk about the magic bullet. So that bullet did go through quite a bit of I don't know, of a journey, I guess, to end up on that stretcher. Not exactly magical, but tell me about the third shot. So that was never found? How is that possible?
Well, because the reason one of the bullets was never found is because it just completely missed the limousine and the president and everything. And, I think what happened is it hit basically the street and it just disseminated. It just kind of almost evaporated. And what actually happened with the third bullet here is that when the third shot was taken by Oswald after the president was already dead and leaning over to the left, and Governor Conley is also leaning to his left, and Governor Conley's wife, who is sitting directly next to Governor Conley, is actually kind of laying on top of him. Again, just for clarity purposes, the governor and his wife were sitting in front of Jackie Kennedy and the president. The governor and his wife were sitting on on jump seats, basically, in the limousine. So these jump seats actually were a little bit lower than the bench seat that the president and the first lady were sitting on, right behind him, immediately behind him. And in the case of Governor Conley, he was actually about 6 inches to the left of the president. In other words, Governor Conley wasn't situated precisely in front of the president. He's situated slightly to the left. But the third shot that missed, which I think was a shot, taken quite rapidly, I believe that hit the pavement. And we actually have a witness that saw it hit, a guy named Roy Skelton, who was on the triple underpass, who was from a vantage point above the limousine as the limousine was approaching what's called the triple underpass. So he saw this entire thing, and he actually testifies that he saw the president get hit in the head. And then he said there was a shot after that, after the president was hit in the head and dead, that he said he heard and saw, because there was like a gravel that was tossed on the road. Like he could see it kind of kick up some gravel or dust or words to that effect on the road there. So what happened is the bullet apparently hit there, and it was a full metal jacket bullet. So the casing was dislodged at that point, and apparently the rest of the bullet, which was lead, basically, the core, the rest of that, or a large fragment of it, continued essentially in a straight trajectory, ricocheted in a straight trajectory, and about 50 feet or so beyond that actually hit a curb, a concrete curb that dislodged a small chunk of concrete. And that small chunk of concrete actually hit a witness, a guy named James Tague, in the cheek, and it caused his cheek to actually bleed. So, and again, and it's well documented that James Tague was, actually the only other person outside of the president and Governor Connally that actually endured any kind of injuries during the assassination by virtue of that small chip. And importantly, the curb, that concrete curb that was hit by the bullet that clipped off a piece of concrete that hit Mr. Tague, that was sent in for analysis. They literally sawed out a portion of the curb there and analyzed it. And it showed that it had lead and antimony on it. There was lead and antimony that was smeared on it. You can kind of see the shape, the direction that the bullet came from. And of course, again, lead and antimony is what the interior of the bullet is made of. There was no indication of copper, and the jacket was made of copper. So that completely supports the whole thing of the bullet initially hitting near the president's limousine on the sidewalk, or rather on the street or right near there, and that copper metal jacket being discarded, and then the rest of the bullet moving on. But ultimately, the bullet was completely disintegrated, apparently, and nothing was ever found.
Could it be possible that someone had picked it up?
I think the only thing that could have plausibly been picked up was the copper jacket, but even that, according to experts, would have just basically kind of evaporated. And certainly the lead antimony core hitting the curb, which it did pretty hard to dislodge a piece, that thing just vaporized. So I just don't think they're, nowadays with, the kind of sophisticated technology we have now, we could probably run over some, metal detector equipment and x-ray machine and actually pick up very small fragments. But, this is 1963, and they're still trying to figure out what happened and in what order and everything. And by the time they kind of started putting it all together, there was just nothing to be found there.
And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program.
Oh, while we're talking about the bullets, so the first one is the magic bullet, the one that goes through Kennedy's shoulder, through his neck area, chest area, and then travels through Connally and ends up on the stretcher. So that's the first one. The second one is the one that hits JFK in the head, and the third one is the one that hits the sidewalk. Is there any information on the one that hit Kennedy in the head?
Yes, that fragment of that bullet was actually discovered. Fragments of the bullet were discovered in the limousine, because a part of it actually hit the windshield. Basically, there's a chrome frame around the windshield, so part of it hit that, and fragments of the bullet were actually found in the limousine near the president's feet and so forth. So they recovered several fragments of that, and obviously also recovered clearly the magic bullet. So I'm trying to think off the top of my head what percentage of the kill shot bullet was recovered. I can't remember. Obviously it wasn't the entire bullet. There were some small pieces, but it was a significant portion of that bullet. So yes, those two bullets are accounted for.
Okay, so then what would it mean for history?
Let me back up a little bit here and talk a little bit about the witnesses and so forth. The witnesses that I'm primarily interested in are the witnesses that were lining the street right by the limousine that actually not only heard the shots, but saw the president get assassinated. Now, there are many other witnesses in Dealey Plaza who heard the shots, but didn't see the president get assassinated. So again, there's sort of like two classes of witnesses here. When looking at the witnesses that both heard and saw the president get shot, it is unanimous, as far as I can tell, that all of them said that the first shot hit the president in the back, and they described the president's reaction to that shot as either stiffening up or standing up or raising their arms, words to that effect, which we all recognize as when he was holding his arms up and everything. So they say the first shot that they heard is what happened there. They also say that there was a second shot that hit the president in the head. And, we're talking about witnesses that were 20 feet away that said his hair jumped and his head exploded and matter went everywhere. So these people are very credible. Now, some witnesses after that said they did not hear a third shot. Well, I think that is easy to explain because clearly they're in panic mode. Some of these witnesses are panicking because they just saw the president's head get blown off. But there's also a large number of witnesses that actually did hear a third shot. So that pretty clearly indicates that. Now, one of the things I want to briefly touch upon, and I think this is critically important, is Governor John Connally from Texas. He was riding directly in front of the president. The governor, for many, many years after the assassination, insisted that he was not hit by the magic bullet, that he was not hit by the same shot that hit the president that caused his arms to flail up. And the governor acknowledged, hey, the science doesn't show that, but in his mind, that's how he recalls it. Because this is what the governor said. This is what the governor says he recalls taking place at the time. And this is critically important in terms of establishing that indeed it was the third shot that missed. The governor said that when the limousine turned onto Elm Street, shortly after the turn, he said that, the president and he were kind of looking off to the right a little bit. The president was waving, that type of thing. And he said that he heard a first shot. Again, the governor heard the first shot, which he said he immediately recognized as a rifle shot. And the governor said that he turned to his right, almost completely around to his right, to see what happened, because that's the direction the shot came from. And he said that while he turned almost completely around to the right, he didn't actually get the president within view. So he actually didn't catch eye of the president. And then the governor says he immediately started to turn his head back around to the left because he was going to then look over his left shoulder to see if he could see anything. And it was about the point where the governor was facing forward yet again. He said that the governor says that that's when he believes that he got shot. And he says the reason why is because it was at that moment that he felt this sudden pop in his back, like somebody with a clenched fist. And this is exactly how the governor describes it. It's like a clenched fist punching him in the back. And he said, in fact, the force was so strong that it actually thrust him forward a little bit, pushed him forward. And when he was pushed forward, he could see that on his shirt was blood. And he said he knew at that point that he had been hit. So that's when the governor says that he was hit. He says that shortly thereafter, or immediately thereafter, his wife, who was sitting to his left, pulled him over into her lap, and that she also kind of laid on top of him. And he said as he was laying down there on the side there, and this happened all very quickly, he said he heard a third shot, and he heard it impact. He heard it impact something that he said was the president's head. So in his mind, he's thinking he heard the third shot, he heard it impact the president's head, and therefore the president's dead. So that's what the governor recalls hearing during the assassination. At no point was he actually looking at the president while these shots are taking place. This is just from hearing. The thing is that if you look at the Zapruder film, you can see that what happens is the limousine for a moment goes behind a metal street sign. And everything is okay up to the point when the limousine goes behind the metal street sign. In other words, no one has been shot at that point, and nobody's reacting to a missed shot at that point. But as the limousine is directly out of sight behind this metal street sign, again at approximately Zapruder frame 215, that's when the president gets shot, and that's when the governor gets shot. They're both hit with the same bullet. So within a few frames after that, the limousine reemerges from behind the metal sign, and you see the governor kind of sort of looking straight forward, maybe slightly to his right, unaffected, not doing anything momentarily, but you see the president lifting his arms up. And that's a neurological reaction, his lifting his arms up, which indicates that his spine was damaged. And then within a second or two of that, you do see the governor completely turn to the right, exactly as he describes in his memory. You see he completely turned to the right and look almost directly behind him in the direction of the president. So that's spot on. Then what you have is you see the governor turning back around, as he said, and just about the point when the governor is facing forward, that's when the president gets shot in the head. That's when he takes the fatal headshot. And this is the point, if you look very carefully at Governor Connally, you also see that it's actually at that moment, moments after the kill shot, that Governor Connally does indeed get thrust forward. He actually gets thrust forward, just as he recalls, and then right after that gets pulled to the side by his wife, just as he recalled. So what we have here is a situation where the governor's recollection of events is accurate, but because he wasn't actually witnessing it, looking at the president at the time that this all happened, he didn't quite understand. But what happened here is when the president got hit with the first shot that caused his arms to go up, that bullet also entered Governor Connally. Governor Connally just didn't realize he had been shot. It just didn't register. So the governor doesn't realize he's been shot, and he's still trying to figure out, what the deal is with that rifle shot that he heard. And then, of course, as the governor's turning around and as the president gets struck in the head, what happens, and you can see this clearly on the Zapruder film, is the president lurches back. He kind of kicks back and apparently kicks the back of Governor Connally's seat. We're literally talking 2 inches of space between the president's knees and feet and the back of Governor Connally's jump seat that is directly in front of him. So it's clear what happened is the president gets shot in the head. He's dead at that moment, and he just flails back. His upper body flails back, and his legs kick forward. And indeed, they kick Governor Connally's chair, and they kick it hard enough where it actually pushes the governor forward. You can clearly see this on the Zapruder film. The problem for Governor Connally is he equated that kick to him being shot. He didn't realize, of course, that he had actually been shot about 5.5 seconds earlier at the same time the president got shot the first time. So, of course, the governor is kicked forward. He notices he has blood all over his shirt, which makes sense because at that point he's been shot for 5.5 seconds. And then his wife pulls him off to the side, and this is clearly visible on the Zapruder film. And it was on his side when he heard the final shot. Now, when that final shot is taken, it's clearly after the president's already been shot in the head. So why this is all important and why this is, I think, really notable is because if you look at the time when that third shot would have been taken, which was approximately 2.5 seconds after the president's headshot, the kill shot, at that moment, Governor Connally is leaning to the left and his wife is leaning over him out of sight. The president has been shot in the head and is leaning to the left dead out of sight. And there is only one person that is still within gunshot sight of Lee Harvey Oswald. Only one person that he could have been shooting at, and that's Jackie Kennedy. In fact, it's at that exact moment that Jackie Kennedy is actually climbing on the back of the trunk of the car in a particularly high profile position that third and final missed shot took place. So it does appear to indicate that Lee Harvey Oswald wasn't just trying to kill the president, he was also trying to kill the First Lady. And that obviously is significant. Again, it completely rewrites our understanding of what happened at Dealey Plaza that day. And importantly, it causes us to step back for a moment and contemplate that as bad as November 22nd, 1963 was with the assassination of the president, apparently it could have even been worse. Apparently the First Lady could have also been assassinated.
I mean, that would have been extraordinarily significant. If you think about the things that Jacqueline Kennedy went on to do with the remainder of her life, and I mean, just the charitable work that she did and everything that came from her trauma that she was able to overcome and do something better in the world. Yeah, that would be an extraordinary loss. So I'm wondering, this all happened really fast, right? This all happened within the time frame of a few seconds. So it was 3 shots. And you have Lee Harvey Oswald, who, by the way, I just want to remind people, he was 24. Crazy, right? 24 years old. When you see the pictures of him, he looks like he's 40. You know, he does not look like he's 24.
Yeah.
Even in the photos of him prior to the assassination, you know, he looks like he aged at a much more accelerated pace than typical. But anyway, what was preventing him from waiting for Vice President Johnson's car to continue into the path where he could have assassinated him as well, or made the attempt to assassinate him? Or was he just taking, like, I know I got at least 3 shots right here that I can get off, so I might as well go for Jackie and not have to wait? Like, what do you think was preventing him from furthering the political damage by taking out the vice president as well?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, I think Lee Harvey Oswald, who is a demonstrated just loser. I mean, he's a certifiable loser. I mean, here's a guy who defects to the Soviet Union, then he undefects from the Soviet Union, then he tries to redefect to the Soviet Union, gets denied, then he decides he wants to defect to Cuba. You know, so this guy was just a loose cannon. And very importantly, several months before the president was assassinated in Dallas, there was a guy named General Walker who was also almost assassinated. Well-known political figure in the Dallas area, General Walker, was sitting in his study one evening, and a bullet came through the glass and missed his head by like 1 or 2 inches. And that was a mystery. Nobody knew who took a shot at General Walker and you know what that was all about until the president was assassinated, because later on Lee Harvey Oswald's wife told the FBI that shot that Lee Harvey Oswald actually tried to kill. He was the person that tried to kill General Walker. So we have Oswald trying to kill somebody several months before that was of note before the president. Also, of course, when Lee Harvey Oswald was escaping, he killed Officer J.D. Tippit, who attempted to pull him over and have a discussion with him. And then when Lee Harvey Oswald was caught, you know, a few minutes later in the Texas theater, he tried to kill another cop with a handgun that he had there before he was arrested. So Lee Harvey Oswald was just a certified loser. And basically, my take on Lee Harvey Oswald is he was the consummate victim. In other words, you know, he had a rough life and things weren't going well for him. And instead of taking personal responsibility, he had to blame everybody else. His view on the world and America specifically was, you know, America just doesn't realize the presence of the genius that I am in this society. And, you know, and it was a matter of some angst for him. And so I think he was just flailing out at society and, more importantly, trying to make a name for himself, leave his mark on the world. So obviously when he hits the president, you know, that's sufficient. That'll probably do it for you, brother. You know what I'm saying? And, and I think he also, like I said, tried to take that third shot and hit Jackie as well to do as much damage as possible. Now, as far as kind of sticking around and waiting for Johnson, who I'm sure he probably had no idea where Johnson was, what limo he was in, or anything else. I think he, at that point, the job is done, and he basically just escape and try to get away. And that's clearly what he attempted to do, was to escape and get away. I'll say that Lee Harvey Oswald, I've referred to Lee Harvey Oswald as the 1963 version of the mass killer of today. The guy who steps into a mall or a church or an elementary school and just starts mowing down people because everybody's done him wrong. So Lee Harvey Oswald, I believe, is again the 1963 version of that guy of today. And as we saw, he was not only persistent enough, but just things just broke. History just broke in such a manner where he was actually presented with his opportunity, and he took it and he succeeded.
So Lee Harvey Oswald was an unremarkable man who fired 3 shots at the Kennedys and fired shots at other people too. And so you're telling me there's no fun conspiracy with this whole thing?
Yeah. Unfortunately, no. It's just sad reality that he was, like you've just noted there, just an otherwise unremarkable figure in every way. Definitely, I think loser's a fair way to characterize this guy. And he was ultimately successful with pulling this thing off. And ultimately, the ironic thing about all this is he was successful as well, in that his name will forever be associated with John F. Kennedy, and he'll be remembered forever. And that's what he was trying to accomplish. And he sure did that. He sure accomplished that, which is an unfortunate consequence. But yeah, while conspiracy theories involving the CIA and the FBI and the Cubans and the Soviets and the Secret Service and, pretty much everybody else sounds nice and sexy and really intriguing, there's just absolutely zero to back it up. And it's just not the truth. I don't engage in investigating these mysteries, whether it be JFK or DB Cooper or Gardner, what have you, to come up with some false narrative, some false truth. I want to know what really happened. And what I described to you in Dealey Plaza, November 22nd, 1963, is what really happened.
And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program.
So I feel like I need to hold your feet to the fire a bit and speak for the people who are listening to this, and they might be a little skeptical of your account. In your own words, you've described Lee Harvey Oswald as a loser, as someone who didn't have a whole lot going for him. How in the world would a 24-year-old loser who couldn't even hit somebody through a window, I'm assuming was within sight in that other shooting that you spoke of, couldn't even hit that person, yet he has 2 out of 3 dead accurate shots from a window, how many hundreds of feet away? Up on the 6th floor, right? Like, to a moving target, how does he nail 2 shots exactly accurately as planned when he couldn't even hit somebody, a sitting target that was not moving from a few feet away?
Well, it's important to understand when you're talking about General Walker, this took place at night and he was outside of the yard and he took a shot of some length. I'm not exactly sure what the length of that shot was, but he was firing through a window at General Walker at night. And indeed, it did miss the general's head by, I think, about 2 inches. So it was very close. It missed the general's head by 2 inches. So when we go back to Dealey Plaza, this is important to understand that the distance was not that great. I mean, I've been to Dealey Plaza and I've actually looked through the window of the 6th floor depository, the actual window, not the one to the side, but the actual window. And it's not that far, because I had heard all those things too. Oh, it's like shooting 1,200 yards or something. How could somebody make that remarkable shot? No, very, very easy to do. And again, remember, Oswald was trained as a sniper in the Marines, and he actually was he wasn't the highest level, but he was just below the highest level. So he was very proficient at using a rifle. So on the day of the assassination, what's important to understand is that when the limousine made the turn on the Elm Street, the limousine at that point, as it's driving down Elm Street, is basically driving directly away from Oswald. So the limousine was moving approximately 11 miles an hour, but it's not moving side to side 11 miles an hour. It's moving directly away from him 11 miles an hour. So that's the first thing. So it's much easier to make that type of shot versus something moving completely perpendicular to you at a certain speed. But here's the critical thing. When the first shot was fired, what ends up happening, unfortunately, and you can see this as well in the Zapruder film, is it does get the attention of the two Secret Service agents sitting in the front of the limousine. And you can see on film, they both turn around to look at the president. This is as the president's doing this. And at the same time that they're doing that, the one Secret Service agent who was driving, unfortunately, slowed the car down even further to approximately 5 miles an hour. It was barely moving. And again, this is clear to see on the Zapruder film. So it is, for all intents and purposes, a stationary target. It's at that point that Lee Harvey Oswald takes, and he has a scope on his rifle, takes the second shot at the president and hits him in the upper right portion of the head. Indeed, if that bullet were 1 or 2 inches to the right, he would have completely missed the president's head. It was just that close, a matter of 1 or 2 inches, the difference between the president being killed or not. Then when the president is hit in the head, the Secret Service agents turn around and they start to take off, and the limousine starts to speed up. But of course, at that point, the damage is done. So the shot is not nearly as difficult as one may think, and as a lot of conspiracy theorists have us believe. In fact, it has been replicated many times over on various news programs and so forth. So it was not a difficult shot to make, especially with the assistance of a scope on his rifle.
Okay, but you're saying the driver was on the take because he slowed down.
Well, you know,
exactly what I was going to say.
The sad thing about it is that you have people, conspiracy theorists, who look at that and say, well, the driver must have been on the take. He must have been on the take. He killed the president. Some have even said the driver turned around and literally shot the president, even though there's absolutely no evidence to support that. But, that's the problem, is that, these are complicated and rapidly unfolding events, and people react and respond in the way they do. So it's very easy with hindsight to go back and, pull pieces out of it and isolate individual pieces that are intriguing when you look at them in an isolated mode. But they're not at all intriguing when you look at it holistically, when you get a much better overview of how this entire thing transpired. Because we're really only talking from the first shot to the third shot, we're only talking about 8 seconds. The first shot was taken, and about 5.35 seconds later, the second shot was taken and the president was killed. And then 2.5 seconds later, the third and final shot that missed that was taken. And I should note as well that this is also perfectly consistent with what the overwhelming majority of witnesses at Dealey Plaza said they heard. The overwhelming majority said that the distance between the first shot and second shot was greater than the distance between the second shot and the third shot. And that's part of where some of the first shot missed kind of theories fall apart, because there's really no plausible first shot theory, first shot missing theory, which is commonly held today. There's no real explanation for the fact that if it was the first shot that missed, that the time distance between shot 1 and shot 2 would have actually been closer than the time distance between shot 2 and shot 3, the one that would have hit the president in the head. No one's been able to explain that. And that's part of the reason, as I was looking at it, I'm like, that's not making sense. I mean, it doesn't, none of it makes sense. Not to mention, oh, by the way, the limousine was literally right in front of Oswald, 100 feet away, 50 feet away, when the first shot would have occurred. It didn't happen that way. It didn't happen that way at all.
What is your opinion on the significance? I mean, even with your theory about this, getting the any footage from that mysterious babushka lady.
Well, I mean, it couldn't hurt, you know. That's the fascinating thing about it, is there are people there that were in Dealey Plaza that had cameras that have never been identified. And it is kind of strange that some people just chose to just never talk about it. And there are people that had cameras and there are others who didn't have cameras that just weren't identified. Certainly it couldn't hurt, but I don't think it's necessary. You know, there's another film that was shot of the assassination from the opposite side of the street as Zapruder. So it's actually filming the assassination from the other direction by a guy named Nix, the Orville Nix film. And that's critically important as well, because it actually shows some of the witnesses who later testified to there being a shot after the kill shot and how they responded and everything else. And we can actually see that what they testified to in Congress, specifically during the House Select Committee, and as well as the Warren Commission, we can actually see that the Nix film actually validates or supports their assertions. So I think the amount of evidence is overwhelming. I can sort of understand why the Warren Commission wouldn't go as far as trying to determine which of the 3 shots that missed, because I think they're just primarily concerned with, was this a conspiracy, involving the Soviets or Cubans or something? And they settled that. But certainly by the time the House Select Committee came around in the 70s, the late 70s, and issued their report in 1979, it's really hard to explain that. Especially when you look at the Zapruder film and you consider what Governor John Connally said, which is kind of a point by point. I was doing this when I heard this, and it is right there on film. Anybody listening right now can fire it up on YouTube, pull up the Zapruder film on YouTube, preferably in slow motion, and you will see that what I describe occurring is exactly what happened. It's right in front of our eyes on film, and that's irrefutable. And, one other thing that's important about this, why this is also important to establish, it was the third shot that missed, and apparently he was also trying to take Jackie Kennedy out, is I also think that dispels this notion, helps dispel the notion, not that we need any more evidence to dispel the notion, but it does help dispel the notion that there was some sort of grand conspiracy involving the Cubans or the mafia or the Soviets or whatever. And the reason why is because no credible conspiracy, whether you're shooting on behalf of the mafia or whomever, is going to advocate shooting the first lady as well. It's going to be, especially the mob, leave the family out of it kind of stuff. It's going to be kill the principal, which is the president, and then roll. There's no way in hell that any other organization, again, whether it's the mob or the Soviets, whatever, are going to advocate the president's, get the president, but then also get Jackie Kennedy. So I think that is indicative of a guy who is just sort of on his own, being crazy man Lee Harvey Oswald, as crazy man Lee Harvey Oswald had been for many years.
Right, a bit of a lone wolf. So then if Jack Ruby didn't come around later and shoot and kill Lee Harvey Oswald, do you think we'd be in the same position we're in right now with the conspiracies? I know we were kind of having a little fun joking around about them, but they're prevalent. I wonder, would they be less prevalent if he had stayed alive for a while after?
Well, I don't know if they would be less prevalent because it seems like every big episode in history invariably involves a conspiracy, whether you're talking Princess Diana getting killed, in the car crash, or September 11th, or, why Barney's not on TV anymore for children. I mean, there's always a conspiracy built in around it. But having said that, clearly there would have been value, enormous value, in having Lee Harvey Oswald go to trial, survive and go to trial. So, Ruby didn't do us any favors. I know Ruby thought he was dealing us all a solid by, putting a bullet in this guy and being done with him. He didn't want Jackie to have to be dragged through a trial and so forth. But, apparently Ruby just wasn't intellectually sophisticated enough to grasp or understand the significance of that and why that's not the way you want to go about it. You wanted to have Lee Harvey Oswald go in court and answer questions, and I think when all's said and done, I think probably all of this stuff, or damn near all of this stuff, would have come out, including the final shot and everything else that missed Jackie Kennedy.
So did we just get a little glimpse on what you're working on next? Why Barney is not on TV?
I'll leave that for somebody else.
Well, I heard that the person in the Barney costume was D.B. Cooper.
But that would be one hell of a story to tell if that ended up being the case. I mean, wouldn't it be great if it actually was something like that? Because, I mean, arguably that would make it even that much more just fascinating. But probably not the case. So
Probably not.
Well, probably not.
Well, you mentioned DB Cooper. Before we go, tell us a bit about CooperCon. What's happening this fall?
Yeah, CooperCon is an annual event. This is the 5th annual CooperCon. It's taking place at the Museum of Flight at Boeing Field in Seattle, Washington, Friday, November 17th through Sunday, November 19th. It's always a great event. Have speakers and panels and witnesses, firsthand witnesses. We're going to have a guy there who was one of the copycat skyjackers who actually several months after Cooper did the exact same thing, jumped out of the back of it at 727, 10,000 feet up and survived. He survived and walked away. He got caught like 5 days later because he was, talking too much, and, that's what did him in. But it's always fun and exciting, and we have get-togethers, social events each evening after the day's, panels and discussions and so forth. So anybody who's interested in checking out CooperCon, check out the website cooperconevents.com. And one other thing, I'll put one other short plug in here, if I may. This year, the CooperCon, or rather next year, starting in 2024, the CooperCon franchise is expanding. So it's moving beyond simply being an annual event that takes place in Seattle that deals with D.B. Cooper. There's actually a branch of it that's being expanded that it's called CooperCon Crime. And CooperCon Crime is going to be a series of 2-day events that take place in various cities across the U.S. The very first CooperCon Crime is going to be in March in Boston. Then there's going to be one in June in Dallas, and then there's going to be one later in Seattle in August. And what makes CooperCon Crime unique is that these CooperCon Crime events are actually going to be dealing with true crime. They're going to be dealing with true crime and mysteries and things that are synonymous with the region where the events are taking place. So obviously Boston's going to deal with New England stuff. There's going to be no D.B. Cooper in any of these things. So this is more of a true crime type of an event. But so a lot of big things coming up as far as CooperCon and CooperCon Crime is concerned. Again, anybody's interested, cooperconevents.com, check it out.
Awesome. Well, looking forward to that, and looking forward to the next topic that you bring to the table, something that you're going to dissect and we're going to be super interested in. So anytime you want to come back on, let us know.
I'll call you guys first.